Good morning, Lockdown. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Favorite Album of the Year. We have arrived in the 70s. Saturday morning, the sun is finally shining here in New York. I feel like as long as we've been in lockdown, it's been raining like this entire, 10, 12 weeks? I lost track. I don't even know how long we've been doing this now. It's been chilly, cold, rainy, windy. We've had what feels like maybe 5 days of sunshine throughout this entire period. But today and the weekend looks really good. I think it's going to hit low 70s today. The sun is out. My grass is bright green. There's dandelions all over. Spring is finally, hopefully here. All right, so back to the matter at hand. Okay, 1970. So you know how this has been going. Started off in 1965. We're going to make our way all the way through to, we'll see how long it takes. We may not do 2020 because by the time we get through this, cover every year, we'll still have plenty left to go in 2020, but at least we'll go up to 2019, right? So a lot of good releases in 1970. A lot of good releases in 1970. You know, the years for me, like I think when we started this in 65, you know, up until probably like the late 70s, it's almost impossible. So many great bands pumping out classic albums. You know, there's going to be a lot of good stuff in the 80s too, don't get me wrong. But I think that the 70s, late 60s, and the good chunk of the 70s is just absolutely stacked with stellar releases. And I'll go and say it. All right, if you don't know me by now, my favorite music is from the 70s. So it makes this extra hard. I will say today was not too hard. As many great releases, classic releases were in 1970. And I had a handful of them that I was, looking at and thinking, yeah, any other time might choose one of those. But it always came down to two releases for me. And for those of you, like I said, who have been following this channel, and what I find really interesting is to watch like all the episodes, the comments, and see people predicting who I'm going to pick for the next year. Because, you've heard me talk about a lot of these bands and these albums that are going to be discussed over the coming weeks, right? So I think you guys have a good handle on what some of my real favorites are. I think I might have surprised a couple of you with my picks so far, but I think some of you called it right on. I think a lot of you have already predicted this one. And if you know me, if you know the channel, you know what I really love, you know it comes down to two albums. And it's another one of those things that if you would have asked me this question maybe 30 or 40 years ago, I probably would have given you a different answer. But the album I'm going to go with has become one of my favorite albums ever, like in the last 20 years or so. I always loved it. I grew up with it, loved it back then. But back then I liked the other band a little bit better. As I've gotten older, I still love that other band. They're my number two, but this other group has catapulted to my number one. All right, I'm probably giving it all away now. But of course, we're talking about an album that came out in June of 1970, okay, on Harvest Records over in Europe and the UK and what have you, South America. Warner Brothers here in the States. I'm talking about In Rock, from my favorite band of all time, Deep Purple. All right, so a lot of history here. So obviously the band had previously released three studio albums, right? That were moderate sellers, not too bad. The band was getting on some tours, playing here, playing there, but not making big bucks. They decided to make some personnel changes, right? Their original vocalist and bass player, Rod Evans and Nick Simper, time to go. They happened to be watching a band called Episode 6 live, and they saw this singer named Ian Gillan. Had to have him. He's the guy we want. Kind of came as a package deal with the bass player, Roger Glover, who did a lot of the songwriting for Episode 6. It makes a lot of sense. So out with the old, in with the new. Okay, they go into the studio, record some things, right? They do the orchestral concert and work right there, but still not really hinting at the direction they would go on their first full-length studio album together, and then this beast comes out, and it's like, whoa, wait a second. That's not the Deep Purple I knew from their first three albums, doing all these kind of flowery cover tracks and pop tunes and psychedelia and what have you. All of a sudden, the guitar is cranked up. The organ, lots of fuzz, heavy. The rhythms, pile driving, and that singer, What in the world? Screaming up a storm, right? Like nothing you'd ever heard before, save for maybe Arthur Brown, right? Totally different. The seeds of what we would then call heavy rock, later heavy metal, kind of brewing here, right? No doubt influenced by those two Zeppelin albums that came out the year before. You know, rumor or history has it that the guys in the band were like, when those Zeppelin albums came out, they were like, we got to get heavy like that. All right. Although these guys, although they had plenty of bluesy background, they, Richie Blackmore, their lead guitar player, a lot of classical elements to his playing, mixed with the blues, turning it into fiery rock. His Fender Stratocaster and Gibson ES was 335, I believe he played. Later, eventually, just Stratocasters, but I believe he played the Gibson a little bit on this, if I'm not mistaken. All right, mostly Strats, though. Marshall amps, big Hammond organ from John Lord. Ian Pace rumbling on the drums underneath. Their mainstay drummer from day one. A heavy, heavy, heavy album. The heaviest album they would ever record. Right, kicking off with the mighty Speed King. The beginning of that song, man, if you Blackmore, Heather Blackamore, raging with the furious tremolo arm burst on his Stratocaster, right? Feedback and distortion. And then a slamming, fast-paced song, all right, with crazy screams from Gillan. Okay, moving into the heavy, crunchy Bloodsucker. And finishing off, side 3, the lengthy epic, one of their most unforgettable songs, Child in Time. Right, song all about the Vietnam War. Right, starts off very mellow, that Hammond organ, right, and the bass, eventually building crescendo, Ian Gillan whispering vocals, eventually screaming to the heavens. A tremendous John Lord organ solo, a blistering Blackmore guitar solo. One of the greatest, in my opinion, extended guitar solos in all of rock. Side 2, you've got the upbeat, cranking Flight of the Rat. You've got the incredible Into the Fire. More killer screams from Ian Gillan. Heavy, that organ and guitar just absolutely decimating everything in its path. Oh, you're a living wreck. Next, more amazing Hammond organ from John Lord, and that great tune. It's kind of bluesy, but it's heavy. And then finishing it all off, you've got the hard-driving, supercharging, hard-loving man. I mean, this whole, you could say that subsequent albums were more refined, maybe a little classier, right? Everybody loves Machine Head, Fireball is fantastic, Burn, all those albums. But man, the just kind of raw energy of In Rock just cannot be denied. And it's just one of those albums that just, for me, never gets old. I can listen to this any day of the week and just like totally love what I'm hearing. And I have been for God, so many years. And, of course, let's not forget the great non-album single that they released right around the same time, the same sessions, Black Knight. Killer song, which they later included on later CD reissues, right? For me, it always kind of felt right at home on In Rock, even though it wasn't an original album track. I mean, Black Knight is a great song, a legendary Deep Purple song. So catchy, so heavy. Just gotta love the guitar licks in that, and, Roger Glover's bass. Just a great song. So, yeah. In Rock, for me, beats out other contenders like Led Zeppelin's third album. An album that back in the day I didn't really appreciate as much as I appreciate now. Love Zeppelin 3. All right, Chicago's second album. Self-titled Chicago, or Chicago 2, whatever you want to call it. Fantastic, fantastic album. And of course, my runner-up, the legendary debut from Black Sabbath. Like I said, you would ask me this question 35, 40 years ago, easily it would have been Sabbath's debut. But In Rock has surpassed it by just the slightest of margins, for me anyway. But it's right up there. It's right up there. That's my 1 and 2, without a doubt. A lot of good ones. So I'm curious to see what you guys come up with for your favorite album of 1970. Okay? List it in the comments below and tell me why. Tell everybody else. Tell everybody why that's your favorite album of the year. What do you like about your number one pick? Again, this isn't about which is the best album of the year. It's about which one is your favorite. My favorite, your favorite, everybody's favorites. Because we all hear these albums differently. They all affected us differently at different times of our lives. You know, whether you heard them when they first came out in 1970, whether you checked them out 5 years later, it depends on your age, of course, right? Or whether you discovered them a decade later or 3 decades later. It really doesn't matter. Okay, it doesn't really matter when an album affects you, when you get it, and when you fully realize how much you love it. All that matters is you did. And all that matters is how it makes you feel. All right, so that's kind of the purpose of this whole show. So visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on the Mighty YouTube all the damn time. So coming up tomorrow, of course, 1970. What comes after 1971? What comes after 1970? 1971. It's early, guys. It's early. It's Saturday morning. So favorite albums or favorite album of 1971 coming tomorrow. Later on today, ranking the studio albums of the Flower Kings. I'm going to try and get to Hawkwind today. I'm going to try and get to Rory Gallagher this weekend. Okay? We got Brian Slagle from Metal Blade Records and Steve Keeler from Rock Fantasy guesting on the show this afternoon to do a top 10 songs of an artist that so many people have asked for, King Diamond. King Diamond's illustrious solo career. King Diamond, of course, also lead singer from Merciful Fate. We're going to cover his solo albums, great studio tracks from the King. Jack Toledano is also coming on the show this weekend. We are going to talk about our favorite 80s radio hit songs. All right, the 70s show was such a hit. I wasn't going to do an 80s one because I'm not as big a fan of radio stuff from the 80s, but I do like a lot of stuff, obviously. I wasn't going to do it, but Jack convinced me otherwise. Jack's like, I really want to do this show. I want us to do it together. So I was like, okay, let's do it. I'll do it. So I got a cool list. I know Jack's got a good list as well. So that'll be fun. So that's all coming up this weekend. A lot of stuff, guys. Hope to squeeze in a Monsters Den as well. So plenty to see. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't. All right. We got some people who wait for me to post stuff on Facebook, and they don't have no idea what I'm posting here on the YouTube channel unless I post on Facebook. Subscribe. This way you get notified. Okay? Click on that little notification button. So every time I post a video, you get an email saying, See Tranquility's got a new video on such and such. All right? So it's the best way to do it. So you don't miss anything. But if you do miss stuff, there's always the playlist. That's what they're there for. So please look at the playlist. Check out the playlist. It's the best way to find stuff. I have everything nice and organized. I'm still getting people every day, multiple times a day, ask me, Pete, did you ever do a show on such and such? Yes, last week. Check the playlist. You know, so please use it. That's what they're there for. So this is on the web at www.seatranquility.org. I think I mentioned this before, but we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're on YouTube all the damn time. We'll see you guys later on, all right? Take care. Bye-bye.